Before diving into this incredible story, consider subscribing to the channel and hitting the bell. Every story here has something to say, and you won't want to miss a single one. Emma Johnson was only 13 years old. A quiet, dreamy teenager, she spent her days at school and her evenings drawing, alone in her bedroom covered with posters of imaginary landscapes. Her parents, Emily and Robert, were proud of their studious daughter, but unaware of the whirlwind that was about to turn their lives upside down. It all started with mild nausea and persistent fatigue. At first, Emma thought it was just a virus or exam stress. But when the symptoms intensified, she had to go to the clinic. The doctor's serious face and her heavy silence were enough to let her know something was wrong. "Emma, you're pregnant." The words hit the girl like a bolt from the blue. She felt the ground give way beneath her. 13 years old, pregnant? How could this have happened? Panic gripped her, her heart pounding, and an icy fear filled her chest. Her parents were also overwhelmed by shock. Incomprehension, anger, and shame mingled in their eyes. The news would change their lives forever, but no one yet imagined that the revelation of this pregnancy would hide an even more terrifying mystery. In the silence of the clinic, Emma realized that her world had just turned upside down. And that beyond this unexpected pregnancy, a frightening and inconceivable secret awaited her, ready to reveal itself when she least expected it. The day after her visit to the clinic, Emma woke up with a knot in her stomach. It had been a long night, haunted by nightmares in which she saw her future plunge into an abyss of no return. She was barely 13 years old, and yet her body already carried a secret that seemed too heavy to bear. In the kitchen, her parents were silent. Robert, his face closed, stared into his coffee cup as if it could provide him with answers. Emily, her mother, struggled to hold back her tears, unable to find the words to console her daughter or herself. How could this happen?" Robert stammered, his voice cracking with disbelief. Emma looked down, unable to answer. Fear paralyzed her, but there was also a mixture of shame and confusion she didn't know how to express. She had never imagined her life could take such a dramatic turn. At school, rumors had already begun to circulate. Whispers behind her back, stares that weighed like stones. Her friends, those she thought were close, now avoided her gaze. Some students pointed at her, others whispered and laughed. Every step in the hallways was a cruel reminder of her situation. Only her grandmother, Ruth, seemed to see beyond the surface. She took Emma in her arms and whispered, "My darling, we will get through this together. You are not alone." These words brought Emma a small measure of relief. But deep down, she knew that this was only the beginning of a long road fraught with fear, judgment, and terrifying secrets. Little did she know, the most difficult test of all, the one that would turn everything upside down, would come much sooner than she imagined. The days that followed were a nightmare for Emma. Every morning, she woke up with a knot in her stomach, dreading the looks of others at school. The corridors, once filled with laughter and conversation, now seemed like a hostile labyrinth where every whisper and laugh was directed at her. Her old friends, frightened by the rumors, had distanced themselves. The teachers, some sympathetic but others suspicious, regarded her with suspicion, as if she bore responsibility for something scandalous. Emma felt trapped, unable to speak to anyone without feeling judged. At home, the silence was heavy. Her parents, despite their love, seemed unable to fully understand what their daughter was going through. Every conversation quickly turned to worried questions and implied reproaches. Emma withdrew into herself, preferring to spend her days alone in her room, surrounded by her sketchbooks and paints. The only light in her dark daily life came from her grandmother, Ruth. Every night, she would sit with Emma, speaking softly, reassuring her that everything would be okay, and encouraging her not to lose hope. Ruth would tell her stories of courageous women who had overcome unimaginable odds, hoping to instill some strength in her granddaughter. But the fear persisted. Emma was afraid of the community's reaction, afraid of what her peers would think if the truth came out, afraid of life itself. She couldn't help but wonder, how would she weather this storm at only 13 years old? And what Emma didn't yet know was that the most terrifying ordeal wouldn't come from the others, but from the moment when the reality of her pregnancy would be revealed in all its horror. Despite the fear and isolation, Emma found unexpected comfort in her grandmother, Ruth. Every night, Ruth sat beside her granddaughter, holding her trembling hands, and told her stories of resilience and courage. "Emma, my darling, you are stronger than you think," she whispered. "Life is testing you, but you will never be alone." These tender moments were the only ones when Emma could breathe, forget for a moment the accusing looks and cruel whispers of others. Ruth helped her understand that her worth did not depend on what others thought. She also taught her to face her emotions, to cry without shame, and to speak about her fears without fear. One day, Ruth decided to take Emma to a small park hidden behind the house. There, away from prying eyes, they talked freely. Ruth encouraged her to write down her feelings in a notebook, to draw her fears and hopes. These moments became a refuge for Emma, a space where she could exist without judgment. But even with this support, Emma felt the outside world was unforgiving. The stares from neighbors, the whispers in the street, the silent judgments from school, all of it weighed heavily on her frail shoulders. She knew the challenges were only just beginning, and that the upcoming pregnancy would bring its share of pain and surprises. For the first time in weeks, however, Emma felt a glimmer of hope. With Ruth by her side, she understood she could face the unknown, even if the path would be fraught with obstacles. This unexpected support gave her the strength to breathe, to hold on, and perhaps, one day, to find some peace. But fate had yet another even more terrifying ordeal in store. One evening, Emma felt a sharp pain in her stomach. She collapsed on her bed, gasping for breath, unable to comprehend what was happening. Ruth, alarmed, immediately called her parents. Robert and Emily rushed into the room, their faces pale and worried, as they realized that the dreaded moment had finally arrived. At the hospital, the medical team attended to Emma with cool, methodical efficiency. Monitors flashed, nurses moved quickly, and the noise of the machines seemed to amplify the girl's already frightened heart rate. Each contraction took her breath away, and fear grew in her eyes. "Breathe, Emma. You're not alone," Ruth whispered, holding her hand tightly. Emma's mother, Emily, remained silent, unable to tear her gaze away from her daughter's face, while Robert tried to control his panic so as not to frighten Emma further. The young teenager, trembling, felt a mixture of physical pain and psychological fear. How could she, at only 13 years old, face this moment? As the hours passed, each contraction seemed more violent than the last. Emma clung to her grandmother's hand, closing her eyes and whispering silent prayers. The medical staff, though professional, couldn't hide their concern. The pregnancy had been extremely early and risky, and every minute counted. Suddenly, as Emma pushed with everything she had, something unexpected happened. The doctors exchanged worried glances. The room filled with anxious murmurs. Emma felt her heart pound even faster, a mixture of fear and confusion washing over her. The crucial moment was approaching, and with it, a frightening discovery that would change the lives of Emma and her family forever. Emma had been in labor for several hours. Every push was a struggle, every breath a superhuman effort for a 13-year-old. Ruth and her parents were by her side, holding her hands, whispering encouragement, but even their presence couldn't ease the terror coursing through her. Then came the crucial moment. The baby began to appear, and immediately, the doctors exchanged worried glances. A nurse whispered in a low voice, "This isn't normal." The gynecologist approached, his face grave and drawn. He observed carefully, calling his colleagues over for a more thorough examination. Emma felt an icy fear rise within her. "What's going on?" she asked, her voice trembling. The doctor took a deep breath and announced, in a voice that betrayed his concern. "There are anomalies, very rare, which require immediate intervention." Emma's heart was pounding. Her baby had life-threatening genetic complications, and the situation demanded a rapid response. Doctors began preparing the teenager for emergency surgery, trying to stabilize the baby. Ruth squeezed Emma's hands so hard she felt the pain, but her eyes were filled with courage. "My darling, you're going to be okay. We're going to get through this together." In that hospital room, anguish and despair mingled with hope and courage. Emma realized her life had just changed in a way no teenager should ever experience. And as the doctors focused on the baby's survival, a heavy silence fell over the entire family. This terrifying and overwhelming moment would mark the beginning of a long fight for Emma's life and strength, and reveal secrets no one could have imagined. The following days were a whirlwind of anxiety and tension at the hospital. Emma, exhausted from labor and pain, remained under observation while doctors tried to stabilize the baby. But beyond the medical battle, another shock awaited the family. The truth about Emma's pregnancy was beginning to unfold. Doctors and authorities quickly uncovered troubling clues. Tests and examinations revealed that the pregnancy had been the result of abuse. Emma's parents, already weakened by the situation, were confronted with an unthinkable reality: their daughter had been the victim of a crime. Emily and Robert were overwhelmed with anger, guilt, and disbelief. How could they have been so blind? How could someone have betrayed their trust and put their daughter in such a terrible situation? Ruth, helpless but resolute, clenched her fists and declared, "We will protect her, no matter what. No one will be able to hurt her as long as I'm here." The news spread quickly through the small town, creating a mixture of support, sympathy, and judgment. Some neighbors and acquaintances showed touching solidarity, while others gave free rein to their cruelty and gossip. For Emma, it was an additional emotional shock. She had to cope with the physical pain of childbirth, the responsibility of a baby she didn't yet understand, and the fear of the unknown. But in the midst of this storm, she found an unexpected strength. Anger and determination gradually began to replace the fear. It was the beginning of a long fight, not only for her survival and that of her baby, but also to obtain justice, protect her dignity, and face a world that seemed cruel and merciless. Emma realized then that her life would never be the same again. And that the path to healing and truth would be fraught with challenges far more difficult than any she had ever faced. The day after giving birth, Emma woke up in a hospital room bathed in the harsh morning light. Her body was still bruised from the ordeal, but worry for her baby kept her awake and tense. The little being she had just brought into the world was fragile, hooked up to machines that monitored every heartbeat, every breath. The doctors explained that the baby was suffering from severe complications due to genetic abnormalities detected at birth. Every day, every hour was a struggle. The medical team had to constantly adjust their care to ensure his survival. Emma, although young and frightened, quickly understood the magnitude of the responsibility she bore. Ruth stayed by her side, watching over her and the baby with unwavering vigilance. She guided Emma through every step, showing her how to hold the baby's hand, how to speak softly to reassure him, and above all, how to remain courageous. "Look, my darling, every little breath is a victory. You are his strength as much as he is yours." But the reality remained cruel. The weight of fear and uncertainty weighed heavily on the family. The nights were long, punctuated by the alarms of the machines and the incessant visits of the doctors. Emma, exhausted, had to draw on her last resources to hold on, to stay present, to avoid giving in to despair. Little by little, she began to feel a new strength within her. Every step forward from the baby, every fragile smile from Ruth, every loving look from her parents gave her the energy to continue. The pain and fear hadn't gone away, but they were now accompanied by an unexpected courage. Emma then understood a fundamental truth: life can be cruel, but it can also be a source of incredible strength. And for the first time since the beginning of this ordeal, she felt that, despite everything, she had a chance to overcome the horror that had struck her. The fight for survival had just begun. But Emma was ready to fight, not only for herself, but for the one she had just brought into the world. As Emma slowly began to regain some of her strength after giving birth, another battle loomed: the stares, whispers, and judgments of the community. In a small town where everyone knew each other, news of her pregnancy had spread like wildfire. Every outing was an ordeal. Neighbors whispered behind their doors, some pointed at her, others looked away with a mixture of pity and judgment. Even some members of the extended family seemed more concerned with Emma's reputation than her well-being. The young teenager felt the weight of public opinion on her, a weight far heavier than that of her bruised body. At school, the situation was even worse. The whispers and teasing had become public. Emma felt eyes on her every step, every burst of laughter seemed directed at her. Her former classmates, once so close, now avoided her, leaving a painful void around her. But in the midst of this storm, Emma discovered unexpected allies. Some neighbors, touched by her situation, offered her messages of support and gestures of kindness. At school, a few teachers began to discreetly protect her from cruel remarks. And her family, united despite the initial shock, stood firmly by her side, reminding her that she was not alone. Ruth, always at his side, repeated to him every day. "Others will always talk, my darling. But what matters is you and your baby. We know what you're worth, and that's what matters." Emma began to understand that true strength came not from suppressing criticism, but from facing it with dignity and courage. Every contemptuous glance or cruel whisper became a challenge to overcome, not a final condemnation. For the first time since the beginning of this ordeal, Emma felt that her voice and her dignity could exist despite the judgments of others. But she also knew that the road would still be long, and that other, more intense and unexpected trials awaited her. Despite community pressure and constant judgment, Emma began to see a light at the end of the tunnel. Every little bit of progress the baby made, every smile she shared with her grandmother Ruth, every gesture of support from her parents and a few sympathetic neighbors, fueled new strength within her. Emma discovered that she was not only a vulnerable teenager, but also a young woman capable of courage and resilience. She began writing her thoughts in a journal, drawing what she felt, transforming her fear and pain into creativity and reflection. These moments became a refuge, a space where she could express her emotions without fear. The family, too, grew closer. Robert and Emily began to put aside their shame and anger to focus on their daughter's protection and well-being. Together, they attended every medical appointment, supported the baby, and built a safe environment for Emma. At school, some of her classmates began to understand that Emma wasn't responsible for her situation. Little by little, a few friends returned to her, offering words of comfort and normality in a world that had previously seemed hostile. But more than anything, Emma realized she had an unsuspected strength within her. She had survived fear, pain, judgment, and threats to her dignity. Every day of survival became a victory, every smile from her baby a reminder that she could overcome adversity. Ruth, moved, said to her one evening while holding her in her arms, "Look at everything you've already overcome, my darling. You're stronger than you think. And trust me, this is just the beginning of a life filled with courage and wonderful surprises." Emma then felt a spark of hope burn within her. Despite the horror and hardship she had been through, she now knew she could move forward. That fear and pain could be overcome, as long as she was surrounded by those who loved her and she believed in her own strength. For the first time since this tragedy began, the future looked, even slightly, promising. As the weeks passed, Emma slowly began to return to a more normal life. Her body was healing, the baby was growing under the doctor's attentive care, and the united family was doing everything they could to create a safe and loving environment. Each day brought small steps forward, each smile shared a reminder that life could be reborn even after pain. Emma learned to hold her baby in her arms, to feed him, to protect him. Every gesture, every touch strengthened her bond with this fragile and precious being. She understood that, despite her young age, she could be a loving and responsible mother. Fear and shame gradually gave way to love and determination. At school and in the city, the perception of others began to change. Rumors and cruel judgments were replaced by a benevolent curiosity, sometimes by admiration for the incredible courage of this young girl. Emma, with the help of her family, learned to face the stares and questions with dignity. She was no longer just a victim, but a survivor. Ruth, always present, looked at her granddaughter with pride. "You've been through hell, Emma, and here you are, standing stronger than ever. Never forget that you are capable of anything." Emma smiled, holding her baby close. For the first time in months, she felt a real sense of peace. Life would never be easy, and some wounds would remain forever, but she had found within herself and her family the strength to carry on. The future lay before her like an unknown but promising path. Emma knew she could face every challenge, protect her child, and rebuild her life with courage and love. She had survived the unthinkable, and now every day was a victory, every smile from her baby a symbol of renewal and hope. And so, despite the pain, the fear, and the judgments, Emma Johnson finally began a new chapter, ready to live, to love, and to rise again, stronger and more resilient than ever.